Oh, well, hello there, YouTube and Facebook and the world at large. Welcome back to Comic Book News. I'm your host, Dan Shaheen. Today, I'm as pleased as punch. I'm about as pleased as I could be with this power-packed panel of comic book retailers. These are three guys that I respect as much or more than almost anybody in the retailing industry. What's really interesting about these fellas is not only do they run first-class, top-notch stores and have done so for decades, they don't march in lockstep to each other. They have different opinions. They have different types of stores. They have different markets and clienteles that they cater to, and they are respectful of each other's opinions, even when they think they're wrong. And that's a hallmark here at Comic Book News, and we're going to continue that tradition. I want to introduce my guests. I want to start with returning to the show from San Francisco, Brian Hibbs. Thanks for coming back, Brian.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dan.
Brian's the proprietor of Comix Experience in San Francisco. Flipping to the East Coast, I am pleased to introduce for the first time to this show Mr. Phil Boyle of the Coliseum of Comics.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Hey, thanks for making the time in what I know is a crazy time. Last but certainly not least, I want to introduce Joe Field, Flying Colors Comics in Concord, California. Also probably known to you pretty well as the founder of Free Comic Book Day. Joe, welcome.
Good to be here with you, Dan, and Brian and Phil.
Awesome. Guys, it is so great of you to make this time. There's never been a crazier time. I mean, I worked in the comic book industry in the 80s and 90s and stuff, and we had some crises, distributor crises, speculator booms and busts, stores going out of business. But man, right now we're caught up in a worldwide economic thing, right? On top of an ongoing secular trend of brick and mortar retail being on the decline. So add all those factors together, and man, you got a recipe for some troubled times. So for my first topic, I want to just talk about this current situation, the pandemic situation. We've got different laws and rules in every state, and it seems like even down to localities. So I just want to go around the horn here and see how this is affecting you in your region. I want to start with Phil.
Florida right now, I'm in Orlando, Florida, Jacksonville, Tampa, Kissimmee, Claremont. So all these places now, Florida is in a stay-at-home situation. We are doing some mail order. We're calling concierge shopping, where people can actually make appointments through us for Zoom. And we do that type of thing, call in, walk them around the store. But inevitably, and I think Brian said it well in his most recent column, we're working 4 times harder to make a quarter of the money. And that's exactly the situation we're in right now.
All right. Thanks. You know, Joe said almost the exact same thing to me. I think he was working 3 times harder for no money. But Joe, what's going on in Concord?
Yeah, well, April right now is trending 90% down. We're essentially closed. We are still doing curbside deliveries on Wednesday and Saturday from 11 to 3. And we do have a Shopify site, but even that is directing people to the curbside. Honestly, we're just doing what we can to keep going through this, and then trying to work our way through the paperwork and all the other things going on with what's happening on that end.
Great. Thanks. Good luck. Brian, San Francisco. On the West Coast, we seem to so far be a little better off than some other parts of the country, but of those places, San Francisco seems to be among the most impacted, maybe because of the density. Tell us what's going on in your region.
Sure. I mean, I can't comment on the virus itself because I'm not qualified in any way. As a business, we are shut down. We're not supposed to be doing curbside, though I have to admit we're doing just the teensiest little bit for people who are right in the neighborhood. Interactions that are less than 2 seconds long, and we're all wearing masks and stuff. But mostly we've switched over to shipping. We've got a Shopify store, just like Joe does. And we're still doing the Graphic Novel of the Month Club because that only is once a month, and that's mostly shipped out anyway. So.
Okay. So I thought that was sort of going to be a subtopic here. I would ask about shipping and mail order in general. I know Joe doesn't do a lot of it. Brian, you do it occasionally for some book club members and stuff too, right? So you have a little bit of a pick and ship operation set up.
Well, right. But we're not, but like most stores, we're not optimized for it in any way, shape, or form. Right. I mean, Phil has a warehouse, so I assume Phil's optimized to ship from that warehouse. But in an individual retail store, if you're pulling stock from the stores, it's set up for browsing for the customer, right? It's set up to be maximally appealing, not maximally I can fill orders out of it, you know?
So Phil, that was going to be my question for you. Yeah. Phil, as I neglected to mention, Brian is a multi-store operation with 2 stores in San Francisco. Phil, you've got like 7 associated stores?
We have 8 stores and a warehouse operation.
Okay. You do a lot of shipping.
Even though we have our warehouses mostly a support the stores warehouse, we do some shipping out of it, but we're not a major shipping hub. Being that we're in Orlando, Florida, that means that Florida is a very long state, so you can add to the shipping costs. So we're actually working on how to fix that locally. Of course, though, we are doing a lot of shipping, but it's still a fraction. Joe said he's down 90%. Joe, that is the new up. Congratulations to you. That is good sales right there. So, we're definitely suffering, and I expect that to continue for a while, despite as much mail order as we can do.
Okay. And so now the elephant in the room here is that all of this is really due to a decision by one major player in the industry, that being Diamond Comics Distributors. They made the choice to close their doors to new product from major publishers. They're continuing to ship stuff they have in their warehouse, but they're not allowing new product in. Where am I wrong?
I would like to make one minor point of order. It is my understanding that Diamond did not make the decision to shut down until after Transcontinental, the major printer for publishing comics, shut down. That was the first domino. And that's why I believe that Diamond did shut down. If Diamond was still able to get uninterrupted product, I'm not sure they would have shut down.
Well,
but, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, there's the other part of that too. Another one of the dominoes is that regional trucking companies are also shutting down. So you've got that confluence of events there where they're not going to be able to put everything onto FedEx or UPS in a way that would be responsible or workable. So with the local truck, the regional trucking companies shutting down, their supply lanes were shutting down essentially, and that made things that much more difficult.
Yeah, and I believe that someone from Diamond said at some point there that they've gotten something like 2,000 packages back from UPS alone, which means the stores aren't there. So even if they were shipping, the stores aren't there to be receiving. So I have problems with Diamonds in some things, but this is one of those places where I don't think that we should be giving them any level of grief whatsoever.
One of the other things we're looking at right now, if you look at Diamond's top accounts and you look at where they're located, a lot of those are located Illinois, which is completely shut down, New York, which is completely shut down, California, which is shut down, Texas, which is mostly shut down, and Florida, which is all shut down. It's like 8 out of 10 of your top accounts, 8 out of 10 of the top 10 are in those states. So who is Diamond going to ship to?
Right. I mean, I just found it interesting that you say that, because like if the fact is that the printers are shut down, so they're not getting the new product to ship anyway, it's really not, and they are still in the warehouse shipping stuff. So it's almost like that was not their decision at all.
It really wasn't, from what I understand. I've talked to multiple sources in the industry about this, and they're simply, you can't ship what is not being printed.
Right.
And then you can't ship to stores that are not open. So there is this multiple dominoes, as we're talking the domino effects here. There's a lot of dominoes that have fallen in a bad way that just make shipping books right now. It'd be folly to even try and do it.
Yeah, the regional trucking thing too, I hadn't even considered. We used that at my store, regional trucking. And if you set up Diamond to be in the choice to pick winners and losers of who can get comics and who can't, that's not a game that they want to be in. So, That makes a lot of sense to me, guys.
I also feel like one of the reasons that Diamond did shut down was to send the message that things really needed to change, that everyone in the industry really needed to take a look at how this thing was going to be playing out in very short order. I do think that there are probably some players within the industry who think that they shut down too soon, but I'm not in that camp. I really believe that they acted responsibly and should be lauded for that.
I agree.
Yeah, not to get political, but in the lack of readily available testing and other measures, it was the responsible thing to do. Better too early than too late.
That's medical, not political. But there you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
okay, fair enough. Joe, always the soothing influence. Thank you. But that brings up another point. Diamond's not the only game in town. Brian Hibbs is a proponent of going direct to publishers, using book trade distributors who frankly have not shut down, although there are some wrinkles in what they're doing, which I want to hear about. So, Phil, outside of Diamond, do you use a lot of other vendors for book material? Obviously not pamphlets, but how about graphic novels, books, other stuff?
We generally have not done a lot through outside sources on that. We, of course, source a lot of the what we call the non-flats. That's anything that's not a comic book or a graphic novel, that type of thing. The other companies, we got accounts. We don't use them as effectively as we probably should financially. But at the same time, Diamond has always been a good one-stop shop. And I know a lot of people have problems with that, but there is a larger fact of Diamond does not make the money putting weekly or monthly comics into boxes. They make money from what else they sell out of the back of the catalog, the trade paperbacks, things like that have a bit of a higher margin. So if you're not supporting the front, there's going to be an ongoing problem with that.
That makes sense.
Brian will disagree with that.
Well, Joe,
no, I mean, I don't know, man.
Yeah, Brian, I want to hear from you for sure about the book trade publishing stuff. But real quick, I want to ask Joe, because I'm curious. I don't know. Joe, beyond Diamond, are you using any other book distributors or going direct to publishers or things like that?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we deal with everybody we can, and but it's not an easy deal at this point with anyone. So I think pretty much everyone's in close to the same boat. There are some book distributors that are shipping things out. Some are doing it in case lots. Some are still trying to keep things going in other ways. Cool, but it's difficult to order that stuff when the customers can't come in the store. That's really where it boils down.
And so, Brian, yeah, I know that you're very knowledgeable at this, so I want you to bring us home on this topic on book distributors.
I don't know that I have to bring it home, but I mean, I buy from every book distributor that I can because it's cheaper in almost every case. Saves us money, and right now, well, not right now, but in general, that's the name of the game. But we're closed, so we're not buying any books, so it's kind of irrelevant to me what the book publishers are doing because we're not buying anything. I'm not bringing any books in other than our graphic novel club, and that's in case lots. So that's very easy to do, and it's a separate part of our business. I will. My only pushback was to what Phil said earlier that we should always be buying this stuff through Diamond because they don't make money on the comics. I mean, I think that one of the reasons they don't make money on the comics is because of the way we've structured the business over the last 20 years, focusing on all the wrong things. And so they're shipping tiny little quantities that they've got to handle, and they can't make any money off of them, rather than selling lots of copies of things to more people, or say fewer books to more people. And so I don't have a lot of sympathy when they haven't kept up with the times.
But what you're talking about there is a publisher problem, not a distribution problem.
No, I think it's a distribution problem as well. I frankly do, because I think that Diamond could be doing a lot more advocacy and a lot more work to try and change that state of affairs. I understand that there's a contractual obligation, Phil. I understand that, but contracts get renegotiated, and they've been renegotiated, I want to say 3 different times since the original ones at this point. And, there's not any progress on this, despite long-time complaints from the marketplace.
Phil, explain what you mean by it being a publisher problem.
Sales have been dropping, and I think a lot of it is the publishers have not engaged the marketplace that exists. We've seen a lot of niche publishing from some of the majors. There's nothing wrong with publishing a Wolverine comic for Wolverine fans. You don't have to change it up. You don't have to make him something he's not. You don't have to change the entirety of what you're doing to try and engage a customer base that just likes good superhero stories. The tent is big enough for everything without removing pieces of it just to make points, whether it's a personal agenda or anything else. And I think we've really pushed away a lot of people, and not putting politics into it, but Florida is a very purple state. We are a 51-49 in any given election, just about, which means half of our customers are offended by everything. So it makes it difficult when comics are moving either left or right to sell comics down the middle. And not all states are like that, but Florida certainly is.
Okay. Joe, I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I agree with Phil on this. I do think this is a big wide tent, and sometimes changes are made with some of these books just to create a little controversy or try to get some headlines. But going back to what we were saying, though, is that I think Diamond does advocate, but I really don't believe that is that big a part of what they need to be doing. They are a distributor. They need to be distributing what they do as best as they can. And I think for the most part, they do a really good job with that. And they have to straddle the line between their suppliers, the ones they're buying from, the publishers and toy manufacturers and whatever, and the retailers who were buying it from them. It's a really difficult balance, and it's the part of the business that has the thinnest margins of all. So I think really concentrating on distribution is what they need to be doing, and they do that pretty well.
I've always felt like the switch over, when they made the switch to being brokered publishers and they didn't have to own any inventory, so they didn't have skin in the game, where they could sort of, like, by taking positions on good products, give a signal to the publishers about what they thought was more sellable or not, I thought maybe affects the feedback to the publishers and has created this, just because they just want as many pamphlet comics going through their warehouse as possible, because they make money no matter what.
Well, if you look at some of the much smaller publishers, they might be making Diamond might be making 15 to 20% on each of those, where they might be making less than 10% on anything from the major publishers. We are sort of living and dying by deals that were made 23 years ago that still don't hold up. That don't hold up very well in today's marketplace.
Very true.
Okay, I believe that. Yeah. So.
I think that the number of SKUs that Diamond is distributing, they're not profitable on the bottom 10% at least, maybe the bottom 20%. When you're looking at variant covers that are selling, 800 copies that they're obligated to distribute, they're not making money doing that. Sorry, the math says.
Well, quick plug for next week's live stream. We're going to be talking about variant covers and that whole shell game or scam or opportunity, if you want to look at it another way. So thanks for bringing that up. Here, guys, I want to talk about this while we're on the subject of distribution, and we're in this moment of crisis, right? A lot of things have been floated as potential fixes, short-term fixes, but also that might point the way towards longer-term change in the distribution chain, like you're talking about. So one of the things that Brian is a huge advocate of is returnability, affidavit, full returnability, 60 days. Brian wants it, I think, on all books forever going forward. My question to you, but at least for this crisis, but if you did have it going forward, Brian, this is my question. how many discount points are you willing to give up for that?
0. No, none whatsoever. You crazy?
I know you don't want to, but how many would you be willing to give up?
That sell periodical comics. There are no other places to sell periodical comics. It is in the publisher's best interest to keep us going. The need. So look, even when books are fully returnable in a nationwide marketplace, okay, my publisher sources are telling me that they're getting back almost always single-digit percentages, which means that returns are not a big factor, actually. All they are is a backstop for the retailer, okay? What I want going forward is for 3 months, maybe 6 months after all the stay in places get lifted up and we all get to reopen again, I would like full returnability across the lines of all periodical comics that are coming out for that period of time, because we don't know how many customers are coming back. We have no way of knowing that. And if I'm not offered that kind of a full returnability or ridiculously preposterous discounts, and I don't mean like just what Marvel's done so far, I mean even more than that, I don't see how a retailer is able to buy in, right? I'm actually right now very strongly considering doing without periodical comics except for subscriptions going forward, you know, unless I'm given a clear signal by the publishers, you know, because I think that I can make the pivot to a full bookstore. I think I can.
In your market, I believe you could, Brian, with what you've achieved already in your store and the way you've positioned yourself and the way San Francisco is known to support specialty bookstores to varying degrees. I think you could. Yeah. But Phil, tell me about returnability.
I had a conversation with one of the publishers, and the guy said, "Well, if I'm putting out these 2 books, which one do you want returnability on?" I said, "That's not the question you should be asking me. You should be asking me, which of these 2 books do you want numbers on? Which of these 2 books do you want to sell in my store? Because I'm not going to take a chance on a $4.99, a $5.99 book when out of all of our hundreds of subscribers, and we have subs across the line for 12 people. 12 people want a book. That's a ridiculous number, because a lot of people don't want to commit to things before they actually, and here's the important part, pick up a book, the tactile product in our store, and look through it. If they wanted to buy digitally, they would be doing that, but they like the feel of the comic in their hands. They want to look at it. They want to see the art, how it looks on the page, and then they decide if they want to buy that in a lot of cases. If you're not giving me the opportunity to put those on my stands, and the publishers have the cheapest cost to print and put a book on our stands. For us to take the risk on that, it's going to be very hard to sell comics off the stands, especially when there's 600 SKUs that we follow on a weekly basis, 600 new comic SKUs. We cannot afford to do that across the line. It is simply literally hundreds of thousands of dollars for the equivalent of marketing comics within our stores. We need some relief on that.
Yeah, I think that's well, one of the things that's going on here with this pause in business is that we all have the time to be able to look at what we've been doing and maybe change directions a little bit. And my store is a little bit unusual in that we sell about 80% of our comics off the rack rather than out of subscription boxes. So I really shoulder a lot of risk. I would love to see returnability, because I believe every comic shop needs to actually have those copies on the rack in order to try to grow the market. And we're not doing that at this point. We've had a stagnant market because retailers have been shy about putting anything on the rack past subscription copies, and publishers have been shy about pushing the stuff to us in a way that takes some of the risk from us. Going forward, we're going to need some risk mitigation from publishers, and we're going to need some a little bit more judicious line. I would call it mitigation there too, rather than line extension, line mitigation. We need some sense of what every publisher is going to come out with. We've seen sales go up on Boom because they dropped a number of titles and concentrated on a few things that they've been able to promote and push out to the market and give us returnability. That's a small model, but I think that's a model that can be extended to the wider market.
I think addition by subtraction is a real thing. And when I look at a previews catalog now, my mind reels at what an awful way that is to order comics.
I don't think anybody orders comics from previews. There are very few people that actually pour through that and make their decisions on comics from that is unfortunately that's Diamond's tool to show suppliers what they do, but it is not either a reader's tool or a retailer's tool to be able to actually buy what we want to buy.
I think I agree with that. So guys, as I look, if you were a publisher, if you were DC, I talked about this with Brian a little bit, I think. I see a lot of signals from DC that they, even before this crisis, that they are starting to hedge their bets, pivot more towards the bookstore market. Maybe they're trying to expand into it, but part of me says that maybe they want to make sure that they have a strong and healthy market outside of the direct market for comics. And Scholastic has eaten their lunch in the bookstores, and they are outright aping Scholastic in the bookstores right now. So Brian, I want to hear your thoughts on it. Is DC like kind of courting with their new ownership and new everything else and a focus on maybe on the bottom line? Are they courting a new distribution channel?
Well, yeah. I mean, but they've been courting that distribution channel for decades now. I mean, this isn't anything new. It's just there's a moment in time where, you know, if they do YA material, then maybe they're able to sell it. But I don't think that's anything new, and I don't think it's anything weird necessarily. You know, the questions I want to ask are, what does your line look like when we get back? You know, how many comics a month are you publishing? How does it work? We've lost Dan as a picture, so I don't know if
I was slowing down.
Okay.
I was slowing down, so I turned my camera off, but I'm here.
Very, very good. Just making sure.
Yeah.
You know, but I would very much like to, what's the saying, being a mushroom, living in the dark and fed shit, you know? I would very much like our publishers to let us know what their plans are for the next 6 months to a year. Like editorially, like what does the line look like? What are we being asked to buy into? What are we being asked to sell? You know, I find it very, very difficult to sell most Marvel and DC product because I don't really know about it until the consumer knows about it, right? So it's how am I supposed to have any amount of time to think about what I'm going to do to present this and to grow this? I really think coming out of this, though, if the publishers get their act together and reduce their lines, maybe relaunch some stuff judiciously, rethink what they're doing, and we promote it correctly, I actually think we could get hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of new people reading comics if we do it right. I honestly believe that in my heart.
I think it's possible.
One of the points is, and you say retailers should know about it before the public does. But the problem with that is Dan Didio was on stage when Bleeding Cool already had an article about what he was talking about on stage. And that was a retailer-only event. Yeah. So, but my point has always been, I have never lost a single sale to a spoiler. I have lost tens of thousands of sales to no spoilers.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not talking about losing a sale. I'm talking about losing opportunity.
Same thing here.
No, Joe, wait a minute. Joe is often you've been referred to as the raging yin and the sober yang of the industry, Phil and Brian. I want to hear Joe, the peacemaker. Tell me what he thinks.
Well, yeah, I mean, I want to back up for a second. You talk about how Scholastic was eating DC's lunch. The problem is DC was last in the lunch line. You know, if you're back, you're not going to get the cinnamon rolls if you're all the way at the end of the line. And
I don't get what you mean.
Well, look, if Scholastic has been at it for a long time, they've built an army of people who love their stuff, teachers, librarians, and retailers too. it blows my mind that so many of those books are available at all of these scholastic book fairs everywhere, and yet they're still top of the line bestsellers here at Flying Colors.
They're great.
I would love for some of the new DC graphic novels to be top of the line bestsellers here. I'd love for Marvel. I love bestsellers. Let's just lay it out there, okay?
Absolutely.
This is an area where I've looked at it and said, like Brian and Dan, you suggested that Brian could do, that we could pivot our businesses to something that looks a little bit different after all this is over. Well, I've been kind of doing that small pivot anyway, but I really think that we need to take a longer look at that. And if there's any money for me to be able to do some of the fixturing things that I would like to do, then we will have a much more dedicated space to some of the things that are mass market but sell great here. Great
point. I will take a quibble though, Joe. As much as I'm going to risk arguing with the great Joe Field, I'm going to say DC was at the front of that line in the book trade. They owned comics in the bookstore. They have the most critical acclaim and the best sales for adult material.
That's a different market. That's a different market.
Right.
Yes, they were early on with Watchmen and Dark Knight and all of that, and they did fantastic stuff. They're selling hundreds of thousands of copies, but the migration of book sales to younger audiences is something that our publishers in the direct market have not done a real good job catching up to, and I think there's lost opportunity there that they're only starting to realize.
Brian, I know, has a lot of thoughts on that too. I just want to say that be prepared, guys. If you can stick around for the next 20 years, the kids that are growing up right now reading that stuff are going to be your best customers.
Yeah. Well, and comics are going to be so amazing in 20 years too. Not that they're not amazing now.
Right.
I think even more amazing now in 20 years because the kids today don't have rules. You know, all the comics we read when we were kids, there was a lot of rules about what comics could or could not be. And I don't see that happening with comics today. I wanted to make a kind of a sideways point to this that they just released one of the new kids-oriented DC book this week. It was
Gotham High.
Gotham High, thank you. And Amazon didn't have it on sale like they usually do. I mean, it's on sale, but it's not the normal 40% off. And one of the reasons for that is because the direct market's not there to compete with them any longer.
And the kids are at home, yeah.
Hello, there's an eye opener, isn't it?
No, well, but it's not a thing that I think that anyone's talking about, especially out in the real world. And I think it's important that those consumers who may be watching this grasp that it's the direct market that keeps the prices low, that keeps Amazon able to undercut us, frankly.
Amazon is the evil empire, and they are out to take away any business they can from this channel and from other channels so that they can make more money on it on their own when they own the channel. That's just the way it is.
I again, I'm going to quibble a tiny bit with that because actually Amazon kind of has pivoted more towards not even selling or owning any product either, and just being sort of like the digital infrastructure for you or me or anybody else to sell comics through, and they just take a nice meaty cut of that. So I think there's room for them anyway in a profitable company.
There is no room in my life for Amazon, period.
Fair enough. And we're going to avoid the Walmart topic too. Although actually we probably should. You know what? We're not. I'm going to go into that because I bet you hate Walmart too. So tell me what you think about the 100-page giant.
Walmart is a benevolent little kingdom compared to Amazon, and I hate Walmart.
Right there with you, Joe.
That's three for three.
Okay, fair enough, guys. Okay, so we talked about pivoting to different business models, whatever. In this crisis moment, though, there's only so much that you can do. I'm going to get real for a second. If there's a second wave of COVID and we say we're going to shelter and everybody's got to shelter in place for another 6 months or a year, what happens to your business flat out?
Oh, it goes away. I
What?
mean, unless the government steps in further than they have, if we get the money that they say we're going to from the CARES Act, I mean, we're okay for 2 months. We're okay. I mean, I'm losing money, but not losing so much money that I can't stay in business. But we would need a whole lot more money if they want us to go 2 months and 2 weeks, because that's when it stops working.
Phil,
even if we get 100% of what we qualify for under the payroll protection plan, that doesn't get us through 2 months here. And I think one of the things that some municipalities are going to look at, and in Brian's case, I know that there are legacy businesses in San Francisco. I would hope that the city would look at those legacy businesses and want to keep them. And I would also hope that looking further out into the suburbs where Concord is, 20 miles east of San Francisco, that the city here would look at that sort of thing as well. And Phil's been around longer than Brian and I have, so I would hope that would happen in Florida as well. I think there are different things that can be done to keep these businesses intact and as a part of the fabric and character of the communities we're in. And I think there's a really necessary spot for that. And that's just not the business guy talking. That is the person who wants to live in a nice area. And I do believe there are people working in government who understand that, whether they're a federal, local, or state. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to come past this in some reasonable way. I'm always hopeful, though, so there you go.
Okay. So, Phil, people think that having a chain means, man, you just got endless bank and you guys can weather this storm, and that you've got a long runway, right? But isn't your runway actually shorter when you have a large organization like that?
Well, one of the problems is we had between the 8 stores, we have like 50 employees, and when those stores close, obviously, we have to lay off a lot of people, but there is an infrastructure that has to be maintained even if the stores aren't opened. There is insurance payments that have to be made. There's electricity has to be paid, phone. I have people who are mandatory just to keep the marketing going. If we don't do marketing right now, and we don't reach out to our customers and say, hey, not only are we still here, we're not going away, then people forget that you existed. They forget why they loved what we do. And we've got to make sure that we are part of that community. We want to be part of that community. So there is a cost to that. And it's a cost that money goes away quickly. And we've got money to weather a month. We get the check money in, or the SBA money in. We'll be good for 2 months. But the question is, if we have to hunker down and stay in place forever, or even worse, they're talking about possibly getting through this, and then in December we could have a new wave of this.
Right.
Well, the problem with that is retailers are going to be revolting in the streets if you close them during the Christmas season. You shut down retail and hand it all over to Jeff Bezos.
Right.
I'll be wearing a little elf costume out in the parking lot.
But I really want to point out, this is not exclusive or unique to comic book stores, obviously.
No,
Right.
We're talking about the whole entirety of the economy.
Absolutely.
Not able to survive unless someone steps in. And so I just think the government is going to have no choice but to step in.
I think it's a great point. I neglected to bring that up at the top of the hour, right, guys? As we know, there's a lot going on in this crazy world right now, and there's a lot bigger fish to fry in the world than what's happening in the comic book shops, but not to these guys, because this is their livelihood and their life. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, man, that comic book stores are really important to the culture of America, the culture we have developed right now in terms of mass media and mass culture and everything else wouldn't be possible without the work that went on in your guys' stores, building the fandom and enabling that next generation of stories to be created. So it's a loss. It's a loss to the world, man, if that industry goes away.
Here's what I see no matter how long this takes, if it winds up being an extended downtime, we're all going to essentially be in startup positions again. And that's sort of a daunting prospect to be in a startup situation 32 years in, or 35 years in, or whatever. But not only are we going to be in that, but all those restaurants. I have a nephew who has a restaurant in Oakland, and a niece who has sushi spots up in Humboldt County.
Here.
Yeah. Okay. And they're going to be in the same kind of boat. Every small business is going to be in that boat. And on top of that, consumers are going to be in that boat too, because so many people have lost their jobs, and they're going to be all filtering out to find what their new spot is going to be,
right.
Whether they get rehired or not by the companies they work for.
Another great point, because the long tail of it will be, even if you could open in a month, those people, there's all that pent up product and demand, but people have not been working, so they don't have the money to buy that product. Who's going to get stuck with it? The non-returnable direct market retailer. And that's a big problem. Guys,
yeah, I mean, Joe didn't quite say this, but it's also true that an enormous amount of my peers are really close to retirement age.
Yeah.
Next 7 years, like,
yeah.
How many of those guys are going to want to start over again?
Not many.
Want to, to go into debt through the end of that? I don't know. I was looking at 10 years left, and I'm like 10 years, and oh my God, I might have to put 20 years of debt on it. Oh, that doesn't sound very smart, does it?
Yeah. And I think that's why Lee's comics actually kind of it was sort of like towards his time anyway. So he just made a calculation and made the smart move from his perspective.
I want to throw something out there, and I don't want this to be an ego thing for any of us here, but these are 3 operations here that really need to continue no matter what happens, because of what that says to the rest of the market. And that puts extra pressure on Phil and Brian and myself to kind of lead the charge back into healthy retail.
I think there's a lot of stores out there that, if no matter how this shakes out, I think we are going to lose probably 1 out of 4 stores, and I think that's being optimistic.
Yeah.
That's the largest. So far, we've had predictions of 10 and 20% on this show so far. That 25% now is the most, and I don't think that's unrealistic, frankly. But there's also the other side of that, right, guys? Is that there are a lot of marginal operations in the business that might be forced out, and for those who are able to remain and stick around, there might be some opportunities to pick up additional customers and maybe some more business, and hopefully. I think after seeing that secret Marvel list that got out a couple of months ago, the way I parse it as looking at those numbers, there might be 1,000 comic book stores that make any kind of a living for their owners, and then there are an additional 3,000 plus accounts that the comics are either a deep sideline or are a buying club or something along those lines. But honestly, there really only about 1,000 stores that are making enough to be able to pay for an owner. Shout out here from the great John Jackson Miller of Comicron. Guys, what you said about leadership and the 3,
our former editor.
That's
I mean, the thing is that it's really difficult for us to lead because we're just we're two of us are just individual stores basically. It's hard, man. I don't have the hours in the day to lead. When that whole Comics Hub thing went down, and and I knew that I had to stand up, and that was 3 days of my life gone, just gone, and I'm trying to pull mail order. I'm the shipping department. That's the thing. I don't have a shipping department. It's me. I'm the shipping department.
I'm glad you brought that up, though. Let's go around the horn real quick on the Comics Hub controversial idea. At first blush to me, it seemed like if you got buy-in from it, it's a potential stopgap maneuver that puts money into retailers' pockets. Of course, it's inviting marketing like you've never seen before to be showered upon your customer base. But tell me why. Maybe Brian, outline what it is a little bit and tell me why you hate it.
Look. The thing I'll say is that Stu tried to come up with something that was trying to help.
Yeah.
I think we can ascribe financial motives to this, sure, but I don't think that was what's in Stu's heart. From what I know of Stu, Stu strikes me as a very good guy who cares very, very, very deeply about comic stores and keeping things going. Having said that, the math on it, or the practical ways that it would work, stop working really fast. If we're guaranteeing that people are going to get print copies from a digital first release, but only a certain small percentage of our customers are going to buy that, so you're saying that some book that only prints 12,000 copies right now, when they get orders for 1,200 copies, they're going to go to press on it? Of course they're not going to go to press on it. We can't pre-sell goods that we can't guarantee are going to exist, right? And this scheme was not a guarantee that those goods would exist. The other problem is the math problem of it all arrives at once then, and how are we going to deal with that? How am I going to track that? I'm my shipping clerk. I'm also the guy who pulls the subs, okay? At least at one of my stores. I can't imagine the level of work that would take for me to handle and maintain this program. And all of this for a lower discount.
Right.
And terms that were right away COD terms, essentially, which doesn't work for most of the businesses in this business. And what about all the businesses that are on COD who don't have any credit? Like, how does any of it work? They didn't even have any
fair question
on board, at least, and they didn't have Diamond on board. Without those two, how could it even work? It was the worst hand grenade of a distraction that we could possibly have at the worst moment to do that, while everyone's trying to figure out what's going on and get their sea legs. Right?
I do think it was probably, though, he had the best of intentions on.
Yes, he was sending up a flare, but it was a hand grenade.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the unicorn delivery system really failed him in the end. So that was the big death of it all. So
which delivery system?
The unicorn delivery system that he was going to use as part of this fantasy. So
right.
It all fell apart pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, that's one that I could see being possible to happen, but it would take so much pre-planning and logistics and negotiations with so many different parties that you couldn't do it.
Contracts. Yeah. There are contracts that say that Comixology is the only place that's allowed to distribute digital comics for certain publishers. Right. Actual contracts. Anyway.
Comixology, by the way, owned by Amazon as well, right?
The devil.
Okay, guys, we're gonna get in. We've sort of telegraphed a couple of these things a little bit. We're gonna go into this little something I prepared called comic book hero or villain. So let me pull up the big board, fellas, and we're gonna talk. We're gonna look at this little slideshow. And actually, I didn't have time to get everybody in there, and a couple of names occurred to me while we were going through this. So we'll go through the few slides that I have. I got like 5 or 6. I'm just gonna go to a guy, got a little bio, and we'll talk about whether you view them as a hero or villain of the industry. I'm gonna start right at the top, man. Steve Geppi, owner of Diamond Comics Distribution, billionaire legal monopolist, king of comic and ring collectors, and a former retailer himself.
100% hero.
What? Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. 100% hero.
100%. This guy has buoyed this industry on his own dime for so many years, and the same people with their hand out are the ones who are basically talking bad about him. 100% hero.
Yep. He's acted as the bank for the business forever.
Yeah, he's been the savior to this point. Joe, your feelings on that?
Steve is 100% hero, and sometimes that's cost him personally. And I just we're in good hands with him at the helm at Diamond.
Okay, I agree. You correct, guys. Correct. All right, Dan Didio. It's tough to kick a guy when he's down. But let's talk, man. What do you think? Was Dan Didio a savior or?
First off, I wouldn't say that he's down. Yeah, he left the company, but man, talk about great timing to leave the company.
Boy, he really picked a good time to leave.
Yeah.
I think Dan will turn out to have been a hero in retrospect, because I think a lot of people don't understand the passion Dan had and still does have for the direct market that I am not convinced currently exists at DC Comics, beyond a couple individual people who we've known for years and we know love the industry. But I'm not sure that as a company, I think Dan may have been the last line of defense in a lot of that.
I wouldn't go that far. I know there are still a number of people at DC who are big on what we do in the comics specialty market. I think Dan, in some cases, was a little bit forceful in trying to put his vision of what DC Comics should be, and that didn't always jive with what either the creative community wanted, or what retailers wanted, or what readers wanted. But you cannot discount the passion that he put into his work, and I have nothing but respect for him.
Truly the diplomatic answer. Only problem I ever had with the guy was I don't think that you should be a publisher and a writer at the same time. I feel like that's a big conflict of interest.
Stan Lee did it.
And he did okay.
All right, guys. Ethan Van Sciver. This one is super controversial. I know what Brian's take was going to be, but I'm a little more curious about Phil and Joe. Like for real.
Start with Brian.
Yeah, Brian. Well, he gave his thumbs down.
This guy's a bomb thrower just for the point of throwing bombs. I mean, when I throw bombs, at least I'm trying to, knock out the hill so we can build a dam. So I don't know. I don't have time for people who push conspiracy theories. That's really all I can say.
Joe, what do you feel? What's your feeling?
I always thought he was a pretty decent artist, to be honest with you. I think part of the problem right now is that in all media, in order to get seen, you have to be as loud and as abrasive as you possibly can just to get any kind of a notice. And that seems to be what his modus operandi is. If you want to get into politics or that kind of thing, leave that to the side. I believe comics should be an open thing for everybody, no matter what their beliefs or their politics are. Comics should be for everyone.
Yeah. Ironically, that's sort of the message that he's trying to give in his own weird way. But Phil, what do you think? What do you think about that?
I completely agree with Joe on that. Like I said, comic books should be a big tent. If you are a huge right-wing follower or you're a huge left-wing follower, there should be there is a crowd out there. So if you don't like it, don't buy it. If you don't buy it, it will go away. 100% capitalism on that one. So let Ethan draw what he wants, and if you don't want it, don't buy it.
Right.
Okay. With every other artist or whatever out there.
Okay. That's sort of where I thought we'd come down on that. Personally, I think the guy's business savvy and is using controversy like so many media types these days just want to gin up as much controversy as possible because that gets eyeballs, and eyeballs means money in this economy, in the whole YouTube economy, right? Just think of the thousands of pennies I'm making right now. Guys, I gave this away a second, but on that same tack, what about this guy? This guy I view a little bit differently than Van Sciver. Van Sciver, I agree, a great artist, especially if you like Brian Boland. Richard C. Meyer, this guy, a lot more controversial, a lot more loudmouth. I feel like he has the occasional good point to make, but it's all couched in a lot of anger and a lot of really weird sentiments. How do you feel about that, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I feel basically the same way I feel about Ethan. Yeah. But I mean, what I'll say is that this is the first conversation I've had with someone in relationship to comics and this guy all year. Like, no customer has ever mentioned him ever. So it's not really relevant.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Although if you look at the numbers on those crowdfunding projects,
okay,
they're significant.
Those aren't customers of ours. Those are people buying the alt-right thing to support that. That's that. I mean, in my opinion, at least.
I get where you're coming from. I mean, they can't be customers at your store because you can't carry it. So know who from your store might want that. Or I mean, at your store, probably less. But I'll bet you there's a couple maybe at Phil's and probably some at Joe's that would be into some of those comics. I'm not saying it's good or bad or you should carry them or not. Just say
I've never heard his name mentioned in my stores while I've been there.
Yeah,
fair enough.
And quite frankly, this doesn't hit my radar.
Okay.
Never a mention here either. He's I wouldn't have known him from anybody seeing that photo. So
well, it's the only known photo of him.
Ignorance is bliss.
Fair enough. Okay, guys, we tipped our hand on this one a little bit already. But tell me, Stu Colson, Brian, what?
I think he's a nice guy. I think he's a great guy. I don't like Comix Hub. I would never use it in the state that it's in. But he's trying something. I disagreed with what it was, but it's nothing personal. Can't call him a hero or a villain. He's trying hard, just like any of us.
Fair enough.
Phil? I'll ditto what Brian said on that one. Completely agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I like Stu a lot. I've had good conversations with him and his wife Sue. I think they're good people and they have their hearts in the right places. I've not been able to wrap my mind around Comic Hub because I am a late adopter when it comes to technology. So, there may be a time when I have to look at it, but I'm going to try to keep my little point of sale going here with chewing gum and baling wire as long as I possibly can.
Fair enough. I'm going to go out there and say, this probably won't surprise you, but I think that the cloud point of sale for the comic book industry is the way to go. I think that there's incredible potential with what he's got. The ability to become a multi-channel online and retailer instantaneously with a product like this is something that every single retailer should at least look at and evaluate for their stores.
Well, Dan, I think one of the things I'll throw in there is that I think Comic Hub is probably the right point of sale system for retailers who are 80% plus subscription oriented, because that's where Stu is in his business. And I think in my case, I really want to be a little bit lower to the ground about that and be closer to the product rather than close to those numbers. And I think that's allowed me to be able to grow my business better than sort of being a slave to subscriptions.
Yeah, that's reasonable. And I think that's part of everybody's choice of business models. And that's what makes this industry so interesting. Okay, what else? Do I have another one on here? I think, okay, so that's the ones I ran out of time to prepare the slideshow, but I got a couple more I want to throw out there. I want to throw out Rich Johnston.
Rich is very useful in certain ways, is what I'll say. I think that if you want to get word out about something, Rich is a very good tool to get that word out. I think that Rich has poor impulse control at best.
I sent him a link to this live stream, and he sure didn't put it on Bleeding Cool yet, but that's another story. Phil, what do you think?
I think too many people in the industry use him as their mouthpiece when they don't want to put out a press release. And I really think that, we've seen things come out about Diamond that he's published, but Diamond didn't. We've seen things from DC that hit Bleeding Cool before they hit DC Comics' own site. So I would like to see a little bit more of that come out to us before it goes out to Rich Johnston.
This is my favorite comment of the stream so far, by the way. Bleeding Cool, your computer can't.
Entertaining, Tony, entertaining.
Like in my dealings with Rich, they've been pleasant, even sometimes when we've had vehement disagreements. He has his way of doing things, and I don't necessarily think that putting up rumors or trying to be spoilery is particularly a good thing, particularly on the business side of comics. But I will thank him because when I sent out something last week about our new website called flycofaithful.com, he was the one who posted it. So I'll give him props for that. If he sees a story and sees a story in something, he'll post it. So good for him.
Yeah, I'll also say that it is my belief that for all of the hate that my peers spew towards him, that's where almost everybody gets their news, or one of the primary sources. You know,
Phil Hero,
people in comics who do not check that site every day. So.
Right? Phil, hero or villain?
I think he's a gray area guy. He serves his purpose in this industry. And I don't think that he's the one causing the problems as much as a lot of the people who are feeding the information to it.
Right.
So,
yeah, maybe.
So he's the mouthpiece for that. He's not the person who's actually creating the problems.
I think you're probably right about that. I think that as far as like breaking news and reporting fast and fairly accurately, I give him a lot of credit. As far as analysis, a little shakier. I go to Heidi at the Beat for that, usually for real, true, in-depth, knowledgeable commentary. Okay, who was I had one more. I'm trying to remember. I was going to go way back. I had all this list of guys. I was going to go Jim Shooter, but then I go like, who is that even relevant? Does anybody care? Do we need
if he was editing today? And good Lord knows we need him. So.
I had a feeling somebody might say that, last thing before we get to predictions, guys. Before predictions, give me a prescription. Beyond COVID and the current crisis, things go back to normal. What would be your number one prescription, I want to say, for publishers and the industry, as far as the product is concerned? Because in my eyes, truly the popularity and the life and death of comics lives and breathes by the quality of the product. And I tend to agree that we've seen somewhat of a lessening of the quality in the last 10 years or so in mainstream books, as far as where the bar is for what Marvel will publish now that formerly they never would have published. So, and DC and others as well, but more Marvel than anybody. So give me a prescription, Joe.
Well, here's something that might be a little bit controversial. I do think that coming out of this, particularly Marvel and DC, but also with some of the larger publishers like Image, Dark Horse, Boom, there are a few of those that really need to alter their relationships with retailers in a way that creates branded stores, so that anybody who is a fan of Marvel Comics can go into X stores and know that they will find what they want, because Marvel is going to either give you give that retailer extra stock to keep their product on the rack, or something along those lines. I believe that can happen, and you could have a store that's both a DC and a Marvel store and get away with it. I do think some of those kinds of relationships need to be looked at. And my prescription coming out of this, though, is that it is for retailers to start taking their vitamins now. Okay. And that is, take a look at your whole operation, take a look top to bottom, what's working, what isn't working, and use this time to get ready for something better on the flip side of this.
Great advice, Joe. I knew I could count on you for a ray of sunshine. I should have went last, because we'll go the opposite way. Let's go to Phil, and then we'll go gloom and doom with Brian.
Nice to know I'm not the gloom and doom here.
I know, Phil.
The prediction is we're going to have a bit of a tough time. But the good news on that is we've got a very dedicated base of fans for the products that are coming out, or at least the characters. A lot of them aren't fans of the current iterations of what's going on. And there's two things about this. One is, if you were having problems before a global pandemic, those problems do not go away, but they will be amplified on the other end of it. This goes for publishing. If you are publishing books that were getting 22,000 copies a month out of the gate, that's a problem. That's a big problem for a publisher, and you've got to address that. That is a problem in what you are publishing. You do not have an audience. Move on. If retailers were having problems paying their bills, if they couldn't make their diamond bill, if they're returning COD packages, if they're paying their rent late, that too will be amplified on the other end of this. The good news about this, and here you said, what's the prescription? Take a look at your entire operation now. One of the great things about chaos is it's a really good time to make changes to your own operation. If you need to adjust your hours in your store, this would be a good time to do it. If you're going to make any other kinds of changes, this is a good time to think about how those changes can be made as you come out of this and what you need to do to get on even footing. I think the entire industry, publishers, distributors, retailers are going to have to look at that, because the market we're going to be going into at the end of this will be very different from the market we came out of on every level of that.
I agree, man. I think I would probably take this minute to like reconfigure my store, do that paint job that I've been wanting to do but haven't been able to close for. Things like that I'd be making happen, I think, for sure. Brian, what's your prescription? What do we do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to agree with both my friends here that that reinventing yourselves is important. I think it's clear to me that we're going to lose at least 20% of the stores, or at least 20% of the venues. I don't know if that means we lose 20% of sales. You know, it may only be 10% of sales. Who knows? But certainly the economics of everything are going to be very different on the other side. And so I think that the prescription for me would be for everybody to get their house in order on the publisher side, assuming that the retailers were all getting our houses together. We need to know what it is we're going to be selling. Those lines need to be much smaller, I think, coming out the other side. You know, I don't want to see 16 Spider-Man books a month. You know, a Spider-Man book a week is fine. You know, probably. But I certainly don't want to see 16 Spider-Man books on the other side of this. I will reject that out of hand as a store. Yeah. We just need to know where we're going and that we're all going the same way. You know, comics. You said that comics maybe were in trouble or something. Comics aren't in trouble. Comics are fucking fine. Comics are fucking fine, man. It's the periodicals that are in trouble. And the periodicals are in trouble because of mismanagement over the last, couple of decades, I'd say. And if that can be fixed, and it can be, it seems very reasonable and simple of the ways you do it, and the way you involve the retailers in that transformation. Again, I think we can end up out of this. If for example we were to relaunch Marvel and DC with new #1s and new storylines and a whole new thing going forward, and we actually advertised it and we actually promoted it, and we had small lines that were maybe 8 comic books a week from either publisher, I think that those comic books could sell 250,000 copies. I honestly believe that, because Dogman is selling 2.5 million copies. We can sell 10% of that with superhero comics. The reason that we're not is because we've scared away so many of the customers. I think we all saw that with X-Men, with the X-Men relaunch, right? That all of these people who had walked away from comics came rushing back into the store like, oh my God, there's one thing and it's really good. I want that. We couldn't keep up with the demand for it. So that could be done industry wide.
Yeah.
If we had the vision and the leadership.
Yeah. And the will, right?
Dan, let me throw something in there about periodicals. I don't think periodicals are necessarily the problem. I think how they're being used is the problem. And they're no longer a value in and of themselves. The publishers use them to get to something else. If one of the crazy things about this Bad Idea company that came out was that they were only going to do periodicals and not go to trade paperbacks to push people to their product. There's something to that, because we need to make comic books the thing. And I use comic books with a large C and B because it means trade paperbacks, graphic novels. It means the whole Megillah. But comic books are still the only real exclusive we have in the comic specialty market. And so we need a health checkup for that category. And I think the way to do that is make sure there is something particular about the periodicals that you can't get anyplace else. The second part of that is, coming out of this, what would I love to see? Dire situations call for really crazy things. I do believe it's time for a Marvel and DC crossover. I do believe, and a Marvel and DC crossover in periodical, to drive people back into the comic specialty stores.
Yeah. You know, I was about to go there, Joe, because I'll go even one further. My thought was, man, the publishers should get together and make it a benefit book for comics, offer you guys an extended discount on it to get back on their feet. I don't know if that'll happen, but I like the idea of it being a periodical even better, to drive repeated trips to the store as they come out, and also that they could put that out next month, right? They don't have to wait 6 months for somebody to do a whole graphic novel. I think that's...
I would hope they're talking about it behind the scenes.
I would think that's brilliant. Well, Brian, what's your thoughts? Phil, what's your thoughts on that?
There's been a lot of creators who have said they'd love to work on those. It's been brought up with both Marvel and DC and the people there that comic stores right now, we need Avengers, Justice League back in print. We need the X-Men Teen Titans back in print. We need Amalgam, Marvel versus DC, put these back in print. And we also need Batman Hulk back in print. So I don't know. That's kind of the end all be all. And then get a monthly book out there, get it out there, put out 2 or 3 different ones. There is no reason that both companies, including the comic retailers, can't use that cash right now. And the fans would love it.
Great. I think Reagan Clem, fellow retailer, makes a good point here. But I think that the point is that this type of book we're talking about is both. This is a sweet spot. And brilliant, Joe, to make it a floppy is actually, that is the way to do it. 100%. You would have to make it a floppy so that you could get people coming back week after week to get the story but fill it full of creators and write it well.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a floppy. It just needs to be a periodical.
Sure. Exactly.
Well, in this age of $10 specials and giant black label $8 comics, I'm sure it would be something along those lines. But man, what a great product to stock on your shelves coming back from the crisis that would be. So please, people out there listening, I know we're watched by industry insiders, so please make that happen. Fellas, this has been fantastic. So wait, we did our prescription. We kind of didn't do predictions. Do you guys, any of you guys have a prediction left? Because I'm going to agree with the prescription. To me, the prescription is line wide cuts by the at least the big 2, and if not the big 5. Less titles, higher quality. That's my prescription. As far as my prediction, well, I want to hear what Phil's got to say. What's coming in the future, Phil? Give me a look at 6 months from now, Coliseum of Comics.
This is asking for prediction at this point. I mean, if I
won't hold you to it,
I'd be playing roulette in Vegas right now, assuming it wasn't closed. I think that we are in for a bit of a tough road ahead, but I also think that when we come out of the other end of this, people will have had to have looked more carefully at what they're doing. And like I said earlier, that includes publishers, distributors, retailers, and it could mean for a more streamlined and better industry that it's going to be a tough 6 months. It's going to be a tough year or 2. But I think whatever we're doing right now to make our stores, to make our publishing houses, to make our distributors better is going to carry through over the next 2 years. And I think that there's a lot that we can do. And I just think that we're going to have to come out of this and be streamlined, lean, and ready to go.
Yeah. Brian, got a prediction for us?
I mean, it's my only prediction is I don't think this is over until at least June minimum. And I mean, I hear a lot of people talking May.
Yeah.
I don't see it even possible. We still have, at last I looked, 10 states, I think, which never shut down at all. This is going longer than any of us think. It may not be until July or August or something like that. That's all I got, man. That's
where I was looking for doom.
That's all.
Okay, Joe, prediction.
6 months from now, I want to be looking back on a successful free comic book day.
Yeah. Oh, great. Wait a minute. We got to ask about that. So Free Comic Book Day, first Saturday in May. I participated in the very first one. I said then it was the most brilliant promotional move I had ever seen in the comics industry. And that has proven to be 100%, 1,000% true. Thanks to you, Joe. So what's the plans for Free Comic Book Day? Where are we going in 2020 Free Comic Book Day?
That's not my ball. I wish I could tell everybody what's going on with it, but I haven't heard anything, and I think we're waiting to see just where this thing goes. My prediction is that I'm hoping 6 months from now things will have been so good that we'll have been able to do Free Comic Book Day and bring people back into our stores in a remarkable way. But
those books have shipped already, right? Like you guys have them already, don't you?
We have some of them.
Small enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder about Free Comic Book Day just because even when we're out of lockdown, I wonder how mass events are going to work.
Yeah.
I think we may still, even out of lockdown, I think we still may need to have that 6 feet social distancing thing, which will make it trickier. Not impossible by any means. I can actually think of 3 or 4 different ways to run Free Comic Book Day that would be, but the traditional way of piles of people coming into our store, I don't see how that works.
But without people coming into the stores, then we're just handing out free comic books in a parking lot, and there's no sales to support all that.
Right.
Those comic books are free, but not to us.
They ain't free.
Hey, with social distancing, just think of the long lines.
Good point. Joe, Mr. Sunshine. I love it, Joe. Thank you. Guys, thank you for taking so much time out of your super busy schedules. Look, we're even getting comments from legendary insiders like Elliot R. Brown, official cartographer of Gotham City and creator of all those cool diagrams in the Marvel Handbook. Thanks for watching, Elliot. Guys, thank you so much for participating. It means a lot to me that you would do this. The whole industry means a lot. The leadership that you guys have provided, and frankly, the friendship that you've personally given to me over the years means a lot to me. It meant a lot to me in some really bad times in my life. I appreciate it. I want to close with one thing that Phil, I've always wanted to bring up is that there's only one time in the comic history, only one thing related to comics I've ever beat Phil Boyle at. And that was at the first Comics Pro convention. We had a Texas Hold'em tournament, and it came down to me and Phil, and I got extremely lucky and managed to beat Phil. Otherwise, he was the player at that table that I knew to watch. So I always want to say that, Phil.
I got lucky. I got lucky early, and that was it. So what can I say?
That was my highlight of my comics industry career. Was that moment. Sorry to say.
I'll going home. There you go.
But guys, you guys are filled with highlights, and I know there are nothing but more highlights to come. Thank you for participating. I really appreciate it. I hope you'll consider coming back sometime.
Yeah, next time the graphic behind there's got to be like sunshine and roses. Okay.
All right, you got it, Joe. I got 1 million of them back here, baby. So thank you so much, guys, and YouTube. Thank you, man. Thank you, guys, and everybody who participated in this. We've never had this many people comment in the comments, and I guarantee we had more live stream watchers live than we have ever had before on this channel. I want to thank each and every one of you for the insightful comments and questions. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of this thing. And come back next week. We're going to do a panel on variant cover comics. Any and all 3 of you guys who are interested in participating, you're always welcome on this show, particularly for a topic like that. I know you'd have a lot to say, but I know you're busy. So hopefully we'll be able to get you back again sometime, maybe 6 months from now, and we'll see if those predictions came true. Thank you so much for participating. And
appreciate it, Dan.
Thank you.
And everybody stay healthy. Wash your goddamn hands.
Please. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, America. Thank you, YouTube. Thank you, Facebook. Everybody who's watching and commenting and who supports this show, I appreciate. It's a labor of love. I love comics. I love comic book shops, and they're going to go forever if I've got anything to say about it. And we'll see if I do or not. Thanks for watching.